The Walt Disney Company has announced the delay of the entire slate of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and strangely, Indiana Jones 5 for an entire year. What is going on over there? Now, we can attribute some of this to the recent Hollywood news of the impending or possibly impending strike by IATSE. And if you don't understand IATSE, IATSE are our friends out there in Hollywood who frankly make the movies that you and I love happen. These are the people that build the cameras, that build the tracks the cameras are on, that set up the lighting, that build the sets that we see on screen. Basically, everything you see on screen in a movie is because of an IATSE member that built it. That's basically it. And these folks aren't asking for much. They're asking for fair pay because they're not paid that much now. They're asking to be able to go home at night and go home on the weekends and sleep in their own beds and enjoy their families. Things that you and I might take for granted. I've really looked at this a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that, you know what, these folks really deserve what they're asking for, and they're not asking for much. They really aren't. So my hat's off to these folks out there. I hope we can come to an amicable agreement with Hollywood and get all this stuff done, and I hope that Hollywood gives you what you guys deserve. That being said, I think there's something more going on behind the scenes, and I think that more going on involves people like Bob Chapek, KEVIN Feige, and not the least of which, when it comes to Indiana Jones 5, Kathleen Kennedy. So here's Kamran Pasha. We discuss for an hour, uncut, unedited, and frankly, unabashed. Here we go. Renegade Online. All right, so here we are with Kamran Pasha. My good buddy is joining me tonight, and we are going to talk about some of this, let's just call it a little bit bizarre Hollywood news, or something that should be a little bit eyebrow-raising. And, you know, while we're not going to sit here and tell you that this is absolutely, positively what is happening, we are going to talk about, you know what, there are some things we need to think about. There's some things we need to consider. We're going to hypothesize a little bit. We're going to, dive into some theories here. But Kamran, I want to start with kind of a walkthrough to where we are now very briefly. And then I want to get your take on a few things, as always, because you've been such a good friend to this channel. Before I begin, I want to let you guys know Kamran now does have a Patreon. So if you are on Patreon, or if you're not on Patreon yet, please go check that out. Check out Kamran. He was my very first Patreon subscription. I did this last night. I have so many friends on YouTube that if they keep hearing Patreon, I didn't know what it was because I usually just subscribe to them on YouTube. But Kamran is exclusively over on Patreon. I subscribe to him. I encourage you all to do the same. He's got a great channel, puts out some fantastic Hollywood insider information, very, very analytical, which is what we do here. So we love it. So Kamran, welcome aboard. And so I want to start with this whole thing. We've had such an amazing sequence of events here in the last few months. We have had a turnover at Disney, obviously, where Iger has made his long goodbye, as we've seen in articles recently from places like Variety. Chapek is stepping in. You and I have discussed Chapek quite a bit in the past. Here on my channel, on Midnight's Edge, on Doomcock, on Pop Culture Breakdown, he's a very different animal than Iger. We have seen the shift in Marvel over the last few months, where KEVIN Feige has apparently been at odds with Chapek. We've had the whole ScarJo situation come down, which we thought, okay, Feige had to have somehow been involved in that. And then, of course, with CAA, and then we had the news with Endeavor, so on and so forth. Chapek is really trying to make a name for himself and get rid of the Iger bully club that seems to have been out there in Hollywood. Then last week, we got this funny little article where Kevin Feige was basically kissing Bob Chapek's butt, which it was amazing to me. And then at the same time, within a few days, just mere hours, we got this news about IATSE, which I discussed in a primer video to this one. And IATSE, for those of you who don't understand, it's the International Association of Theatrical Employees, the stagehands that work in movies as well, not just theater. But these are the people that make the movies go. Yep. They make the movies run. They're the grips. They're the people who build the camera systems. They're the people who build the rails that the cameras are on. They are the people who set up the lights. They are the people who pick up the $50,000 ARRI lenses out of a case and strap them to an ARRI Alexa. These are the people that build the sets. These are the people that make movies happen. By and large, you can take every director, producer, and actor out there in Hollywood, get them together and a screenwriter and say, hey, let's make this movie. They can walk into a set. And if these people aren't there, they ain't got shit. They got nothing. And for a long time, and historically, I could consider myself very easily politically, very conservative, especially fiscally from that perspective. I've never really much been a big fan of unions. The more I read about the people that bust their ass for Hollywood in IATSE, dude, I feel for them. There's something really, really wrong out there. These guys are working ridiculous hours, and this strike is kind of coming into play. I mean, these guys sometimes barely get a couple hours of sleep. They have this expression of Fraturdays, where Fridays run into Saturdays, and they basically go nowhere. And especially when they're shooting on location, they might get a 10-hour break, but they might spend 4 or 5 hours of that 10 hours in a car driving back and forth from the location of the set. We get this news today from Disney. All the Marvel stuff, every picture is being shoved back, basically one slot. 2 or 3 months apiece. And we're talking movies that are between now and let's call it the next big Disney picture after the Eternals. We're talking 2022. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse has been shunted from March to May, and everything after that has been daisy-chained down several months. We've also heard rumors. We were talking on Doomcock's show, Pop Culture Breakdown, Sunday night, and Tom Connors, my good buddy from Midnight's Edge, said, he's hearing rumors that Mando Season 3 has been cacked, at least temporarily, has been pushed, probably due to this. And all of this, people are talking about it. And then today, on top of all that, we get this other story buried in there. Oh, yeah, by the way, Indiana Jones 5, which has been in production since flipping June. And I'm talking in production with principal photography, cameras rolling. And we know Harrison Ford, God bless him. Look, I want to see him have a great outing as Indy. I want it to be a great movie. I know he got injured, and Harrison has had a history of injuries on set. That's kind of his thing. But that dude is a rock star. He's a tank. He gets through everything. He comes back, and he still finishes the job. That is a man's man. Well, he came back on set a couple of weeks ago, from my understanding. And now we were told today that Indiana Jones 5 has been delayed not 2 months, not 3 months, not 6 months, a full flipping year.
Yeah.
I have my suspicions on this. Here we are in mid-October. You and I have been talking about some very, big changes coming at Disney. Chapek has no love for signing executives to multi-year contracts. And Kathleen Kennedy's contract that you and I have been discussing, that Doomcock and I have been discussing, that Midnight's Edge and I have been discussing, is due for renewal in less than 2 weeks. Cameron, what do you think's going on?
I mean, there's a lot going on here. What I want to do is I want to frame this in the sense of where one person's journey is. I want to frame this from the point of view of somebody who I'm absolutely fascinated by as a character study, which is Bob Chapek, right? I've written a lot about him on my Patreon. I've talked about him on your channel. I've talked about him in Doomcock, Midnight's Edge. He, to me, is a figure I haven't seen in Hollywood in a very long time. He's this really interesting guy who very unassuming. I didn't know anything about him when he first was announced as taking the reins. And then over the past 7 or 8 months of this year, I've witnessed this guy prove to be a ruthless shark and killer who is outsmarting some of the most prominent people in Hollywood, and they're not seeing it coming, and they're falling into his traps. So he's a very interesting character. And I knew back in February of this year, and I've spoken about how the moment that he was essentially born in my consciousness as being on the board, because he really wasn't on the board. He was announced as the new CEO of Disney last year, January of last year. It feels like 20 years ago, and within literally maybe 2 weeks, within a few days, Bob Iger said, well, I'm coming back. There's a big pandemic happening. You all need my steady hand right now. And I'm sure Bob Chapek wasn't too pleased with this guy jumping back on stage, and proclaiming himself the star of the show. So
he couldn't walk away.
But there was global events happening. They're still happening. But at that time, it would have been politically dangerous for Bob to say, hey, man, I'm the boss. Right? People are like, what do you mean you're the boss? You've only been here 2 weeks, right? Let this guy who's been the boss for a decade. Let him show his bossness at this crisis moment, right? So he said, yeah, you do that. But I'm sure he's been waiting and calculating his moment, and his moment came this February, and I was blown away by it. It was that moment when Gina Carano was let go very unceremoniously by Lucasfilm, and very unfairly, in my opinion. For her political tweets, which really weren't that bad. And that was the moment which I had said in Midnight's Edge that this is the moment where Chapek has to establish himself as CEO. I said that in early February. I said, because now there's a crisis. Everything was going fine at Lucasfilm. It felt like another year back. 6 weeks before, you had the surprise return of Luke Skywalker, which had become a worldwide phenomenon that had everyone was saying Lucasfilm is back, Star Wars is back, Jon Favreau has fixed it. People were watching videos of people crying with tears, grown men, women crying with tears to see Luke Skywalker flashing his green lightsaber and back in action as a young man. And everything was going to be fine. So I said, okay, well, we've just had this moment where everything was going to be fine. And then Kathleen Kennedy and her flying monkeys, as I call them, decided, well, we're going to bust up this party. We're going to bust up this party because this party is embarrassing to us. It makes us look bad. And they did this thing with Gina Carano. She walked into a trap that they were waiting for, and they took advantage of it. And then, the one topic that Hollywood can't handle is certain events of World War II. You can't make analogies about that. That's a very sensitive topic. She walked into that trap, and they were waiting for that moment, and they pulled it. And that's what I said to our
they by Kathleen Kennedy.
Kathleen Kennedy specifically.
Yeah.
Because her flying monkeys will do whatever she says. I mean, she's Carano.
The story group, specifically her flying monkeys.
Yeah. Story group, other executives, people who
Pablo Pascal's.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what these people do. They get paychecks, big paychecks. I don't know what their roles are. Their roles seem to be make bad things and screw up things.
Or Pablo Hidalgo's. Excuse me. I didn't want to. Excuse me. I didn't mean to. Yeah, Pablo Hidalgo, folks. I misspoke.
These characters, right? And again, you don't really know what they're doing anymore. Since they seem to have been sidelined by Jon Favreau for the past year before, they were just sitting around twiddling their thumbs, waiting for revenge, and they got their revenge. So I said at that time in February, I said, well, this is the only, this is the moment where Bob Chapek is going to have to stand up and become the CEO, because this is a global PR crisis. Right at the height of Lucasfilm, after like 7 years of people talking crap about this brand, it had reversed. It had reversed in a glorious way. And then to lose that over this nonsense, I said, he's going to have to stand up. And I said, if he is Machiavellian smart, he's going to start using the press for that. And then 2 weeks after I said that, maybe 3 weeks after I said that, I was blown away to see this article appear in Forbes magazine, which essentially made him look bad. It called out publicly that Gina Carano's firing had been handled very inappropriately by Disney executives, and by implication him. So most people was like, wow, what's happening here? And immediately the light went off. I said, he did it.
Yes.
He needed this.
You called it. And I think you were right, because this was one of the things you and I have talked about in the past. This was, and people have to understand that the whole Kennedy thing and even the Feige thing, which I'm sure we'll get into shortly.
We will.
This is the Iger dynasty. This is not the Chapek dynasty. And when it's like, oh well, yeah, they made a mistake and all this kind of stuff, and it's like Chapek gets to walk in and go, I wasn't here for that. This ain't my people.
But
I didn't hire this. And then what did we get a few months later, Cameron? Did we not get a story about Chapek saying, these whole long-term contracts with upper-level executives, particularly studio executives, yeah, we're not doing that anymore.
That was in the Hollywood Reporter. That came out in April or so. So, but about 6 weeks after that. And I said, okay, this is Act 2. So this was Act 1 was something's wrong with the Disney leadership. They're incompetent, right? Which was in which Chapek was a titular head of that. So I was like, this guy's willing to injure himself in order to let everyone know, hey, look, I'm surrounded by buffoons, and I'm not being allowed to be in charge, right? So I was like, so he's letting the world know, he's letting the shareholders know in Forbes that I'm not being allowed to do my job, and so now I need to be able to do my job, which is when he seeded out the Hollywood Reporter, which quickly identified the Hollywood Reporter. I've seen two divisions of the trades. There's the Penske trades and Hollywood Reporter. Penske is Variety and Deadline. And those are both more supportive of talent, more supportive of prestigious individuals like Bob Iger, people who are famous. It's a fame-oriented trade, right? Whereas Hollywood Reporter is more about the money-oriented trade. That's the way it's done. And I'll say that's not always good because it has, for example, it has backed Amber Heard very strongly in her fight with Johnny Depp because Amber Heard is backed by the money guy, Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. We need to get Tug, that umbrella guy, in here for that one.
I've watched his videos every day.
Look, that umbrella guy, Tug is a good friend. He's a buddy. I
watch his videos daily, and so I would love to play with him.
We've gotten to be buddies on YouTube. I love the guy to death. What's so cool about him is that he has been so vigilant. I mean, he is stuck. He is the Heard Depp guy.
Yeah, he catches
in the news on YouTube. He's
and
amazing with it, and he's just a joy to watch. So yeah, eventually, Tug, if you're watching, brother, get you on here one day.
We got to do it together because I share your passion for the topic. But the reason I make that differentiation is Hollywood, because it all depends on which side you're on. Like I support Hollywood Reporter's support of Bob Chapek. I don't support its position on Johnny Depp. It's not about that. But I'm saying that the Hollywood Reporters seems to be allied with the money men, right? For better or worse. And Disney and Deadline and Variety are allied with the famous people, right? And so that's just where where they feel their bread is buttered and where they get their scoops and where they get their political leverage in this town. And so in this particular case, because Hollywood Reporter is focused on the money guys, Chapek and his crowd decided we're going to use this as our angle to get the information out, which is that we're going to start having Bob Chapek. And it was a very interesting article establishing Bob Chapek's sort of painful effort to establish control of the company. It was, again, another embarrassing article that doesn't portray him as a man who's been running one of the biggest corporations in the world for over a year, because he hasn't been. He's been sitting there collecting a check and waiting for his moment, right?
Yeah, and technically Iger is still listed as executive chairman. Until the end of this, I mean, he's still floating out there.
But I would believe his power is finished. I believe he is long.
I think his power is finished, but you're still going to see a guy like Iger who's still going to have some title, even if it's like president or CEO. Excuse me, not that, but chairman emeritus.
Yeah,
they give these guys this emeritus status, which means like in perpetuity. For those of you who don't know, it's a Latin word, but he'll be something like chairman emeritus, where he'll still have a little bit of clout in an advisory capacity for the board, because that's what tends to happen on these kind of Fortune 500 companies, especially with a guy like Iger, who's been involved in the company for frickin' forever. Now, here's a guy that spent tens of billions of dollars of Disney money and investor money buying up properties like Marvel, Lucasfilm, Fox, all this stuff right now. And Chapek's walking in right now going, dude, what the hell? I mean, he's got to clean this up.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of problems.
All this stuff. You mismanaged all this stuff. None of it is profitable.
It's like you spent the money and created this air of glory from all this. But bruh, we still got we have debt to pay from these purchases. Yeah. We have a Lucasfilm property that we bought for $4 billion that maybe has just broken even.
I don't even
with some of the more recent. Yeah. I said maybe. I know we know they didn't make money based on the movies. Yeah. That is an absolute given. We can do the math on that.
Yeah.
That is, and we've done the math on this channel. They absolutely did not make money up to the point of at least getting through Rise of Palpatine, because I will not call it Rise of Skywalker. But this kind of brings us into where we're at now, speaking of Lucasfilm.
Yeah, and which is why I made this whole comment about Chapek and his journey with Lucasfilm, because now there's there was 3 acts. Now we're in a 4th act.
Yeah. An amazing 4th act. Shakespeare couldn't even pull off a 4th act, but here we are.
Better, one day, I said this years ago. I said this 3 weeks after The Last Jedi premiered. I was invited back to my business school, the Tuck School of Dartmouth, right? And I was invited to speak there in January. So it must have been 3 weeks after The Last Jedi had premiered. And I gave a talk to the MBA students at the time saying that years from now, cases will be written about how The Last Jedi was one of the biggest debacles in brand management in history. And I said, one day there's going to be tell-all books of the internal.
Is that video still on YouTube?
I never did a video. It was just I did a class. It was a class.
I feel okay. Maybe I've heard you say it so much. I felt like I saw it.
That would happen. I once did what I thought was a confidential talk, and I
wish it had been on video.
This
okay.
Right? So, but yeah, it was to the communications class, Professor Paul Argenti, who's sort of the great communications professor at Dartmouth, and I'd been his sort of star student many years before. So he brought me back in, and I told the young students, this is what's happening in Hollywood. I said, keep an eye on this, because there's going to be business school cases written about The Last Jedi and the mismanagement of Star Wars. And I said, what's going to also happen is there's going to be books written, entire investigative journalist books written about the internal politics of Disney. And this is before Bob Chapek. I said, there's stuff happening here that doesn't make any sense, which suggests there's all kinds of shadowy things behind the corners of Disney that are keeping this structure going. And people are going to look into that. And they're going to be coming out. And now it's going to have this other layer of the Chapek drama. So let's get to that. So we talked about Act 1 was the Forbes article saying, Bob Chapek basically saying, I'm not in control. It's not my fault. Act 2 is the Hollywood Reporter thing saying Bob Chapek is now taking control and is receiving negative feedback from the executives. It was very blunt. It was stating that people are bristling. He's shaking people's heads and people's tempers, right? It was
Hollywood did not and does not like Chapek. And I think there's a turn going on right now with this whole IATSE situation. Yeah. I think there's a setup happening because Disney has come out before any other studio and has announced we're shifting all our releases back. They didn't even wait for the dust to settle. I mean, we got the news on IATSE saying, "Oh, everything's good" from Matt Loeb, the president over there. And it shows such a disconnect between the big surprise. This is historical reality in the U.S. with unions.
Yeah, union
the disconnect. Yeah, between the leadership of the unions and the actual union members who are paying the dues and paying the freaking ridiculous salaries of people like this Loeb character who runs
the Writers Guild. I'm a member of that, and I got lots of the leadership. So yeah,
but it amazes me that Chapek got out in front of this. Because by extension, Disney, and by extension, Chapek, I should say, with this whole, we're delaying everything on Marvel. Yeah. We're pushing everything back one slot.
So that's Act 4. So let me go back to Act 3.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's Act 4, which is this remarkable new act that even I didn't see coming, but now makes sense, right? And now I can try to at least, prophesize where it's going from this. So Act 2, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So Act 1, Forbes, Act 2, Hollywood Reporter. Act 3 was the Victory Act, which is that was when The Atlantic did this surprise, bizarre article proclaiming that Jon Favreau was a savior of Star Wars and listing the previous regime including Kathleen Kennedy, as having mismanaged it.
Yes.
While they didn't say Kathleen Kennedy mismanaged it, her name was in the article.
They never used her name, but it was, I mean, there's no way that you could read that article and not hear that name. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I said, when I saw that, I said, The Atlantic. And I said, each of these is not, none of these is where the Hollywood club, as I call them, the wealthy, powerful, famous people of our time, right? The Hollywood club. None of these are their periodicals. Forbes isn't. Hollywood Reporter isn't allied with them. It's allied with shareholders and money men. And The Atlantic is a cultural magazine like the New Yorker is. So I was like, but that means it's giving the word to the cultural elites of the coasts that it's okay to say now at cocktail parties that Favreau is the genius, and it's okay to say that's not going to be our new narrative, right? So I said that's the victory that happened this summer, probably May, June, I believe. So that's the victory. That's because these articles come out after the events have been essentially moved forward, right? And so now it's like, all right, so this is that article, in my view, had to have come out when, after the first few rounds, basically Kathleen Kennedy realized she didn't have the leverage to keep up a battle, and she was wiser than her friend KEVIN Feige, and she decided, I'm not going to take on the big boss. That's not a battle worth fighting. He really is trying to take control of this company. I hate Star Wars. They hate me. I get it. Let's resolve this, right? I think she knows she hates. I'm sure she despises this brand that's been, a cloud in her life for years.
She said herself that Star Wars was not her thing, that Indiana Jones was her child. Her and Frank Marshall, her husband, that's basically kept her involved in Hollywood all these years, that's put her where she is.
But we're gonna talk about in what ways was it her thing, right? We're gonna get that. That's Act 4. So Act 3 was, when I saw that, I said, okay, at this point, what's happening behind the scenes is Bob Chapek has reached a truce or a peace treaty with Kathleen Kennedy, which means that she's finished. She's going to be taken off. She's already taken off Star Wars because Jon Favreau has been announced to a cultural magazine.
That's a done deal. That is a done deal. There's no argument anymore that Kennedy has basically no functional control over Star Wars, with the exception of, I want to stipulate for the audience so they understand, with the exception of the pre-existing contracts that they still have to fulfill with garbage like the High Republic.
Correct. That's it. Yeah. That people often don't understand that, Chapek is, why hasn't he canceled it? It's like, he canceled. They just have to pay off hundreds of millions of dollars of these dumb contracts.
Exactly. I don't know how much. Yeah, but I mean, it's like if it's going to cost me $10 million or $20 million to cancel all these High Republic contracts, and I can at least have a shot of letting them finish these contracts, and maybe making $5 or $10 million. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'll have less of a loss, or at least try to break even. Then of course you do it. That's a business decision.
It's just a practical, because it's not the forefront of the brand. The forefront of the brand is Mandalorian right now. If someone wants to read these dumb High Republic things, they can read them. It's not going to really impact them.
Yeah, it's like people still talking about the Acolyte like it's going to happen. It's not going to happen in the same.
Really believe that's going to happen. It's like
it's based on the High Republic, which they can't sell. They can't sell a. I don't want to say the F word on this channel, but they can't sell an effing book.
Yeah.
It's basically so far down the Amazon list. You're really telling me they're going to sink $100 million into making a Disney Plus show on this? Oh,
yeah. And the title is relevant because, she certainly started off, the writer certainly started off as the acolyte of Miss Kennedy. There's rumors they had a falling out. Who knows? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Yeah. She's identified inside the system as an acolyte, as an apprentice of Kennedy, and Kennedy's out. So I said, okay, Act 3, it's finished now, right? So I said, what would be the peace treaty? The peace treaty would be, well, Indiana Jones is filming this summer. The probably peace treaty is like, look, you can finish out Indiana Jones. Maybe she even has some creative final say on Indiana Jones like she had on the Star Wars movies, right? And finish it out, and we'll see you later. So we're going to quietly let you finish out. If it's going to take 18 months, you can stick around here for 18 more months, get your paycheck. We'll give you a bunch of awards starting this fall, and we'll graciously let you go. Don't create any drama for me.
And I've said the same thing for months as you. Yeah, I agree totally.
Because we could see beneath the surface. A lot of people can't see beneath the surface. They just go, they fall into the manipulation that the town is doing, right? But we understand, as people who, you work a lot with finance, it's all smoke and mirrors. You know how marketing and propaganda is used to control money.
It's money.
Right?
Yeah. It's money.
So
then you can't just violently cancel an individual like Kathleen Kennedy the way some of the people out there in the fandom would love to see her frog marched out. And you and I have had these conversations. You and I and Doomcock have had these conversations, and we've all agreed it's like, well, look, Kennedy's never going to be marched out and publicly humiliated. You know,
she would burn down the whole town.
Yeah, I mean, it's no.
She knows.
Her ass is going to be kissed to infinitum to the point. And it's like I said, I told Doomcock months ago, I'm like, she's going to be given the lifetime achievement at the Oscars. Yeah. She's going to be given the lifetime achievement at the Emmys. She's going to be a lifetime achievement at the Golden Globes. She's going to be paraded out. And this is, and all of us are going to have to sit there and go, God bless you. As we say in the South to people like that, bless your heart.
Bless your heart. So the bless your heart. So, and that's where I thought it was going to be. But then things started getting strange on in Indiana Jones, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yes.
Months have gone by. This movie is still in production, even with Harrison Ford's injury. And we know Ms. Kennedy's modus operandi. She doesn't, we've seen it in all these movies. She doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't pay any attention, doesn't watch the dailies, and then things get bad and she has no idea until there's a near cut of the film and everyone says, what is this garbage, right? And then she fires everyone involved and basically remakes the movie from scratch with a new director. She's done that 3 or 4 times now.
Real quick, exactly. For everybody else watching what Cameron is talking about, he's absolutely right. This has been a pattern for those of you who don't know with Kathleen Kennedy with the Star Wars films, where 3 of the 5 films she has made, specifically Solo was a massive disaster. They got through 80% of that movie before she fired the original directors, brought in Ron Howard to finish it off, and basically reshot the whole thing. And
which is insane. I've never heard of anything like that.
No, and it even happened with Rogue One, which a lot of us Star Wars fans enjoyed. I loved Rogue One.
I loved Rogue One too.
I thought it was great, but that was another Kennedy disaster in terms of production, in terms of a studio head's financial management. Yeah, she fired the directors halfway through and started over. And then we had the absolute unimaginable debacle that was the rise of Palpatine, and I still will not say the rise of Skywalker.
I've never watched it, never plan to watch it.
That was a complete debacle. They were still reportedly, according to Doomcock, which was later confirmed, as usual, hashtag Doomcock was right, that they were still shooting portions of that movie, 4 weeks before the goddamn release date. I mean, it was unbelievable. That was a disaster. Kathleen Kennedy has a history when she is left to her own devices. Like after the first of the new Star Wars trilogy, The Force Awakens. I couldn't even remember the name because I don't care. The Force Awakens.
Fake Disney. Well, yeah, go on.
Fake Disney. But I was just going to say real quick to wrap up. Yeah. Iger came in the beginning because we know this because Bob Iger put this in his freaking book, his autobiography, that Lucas was very unhappy with the direction of things was going. Lucas was unhappy they didn't use his treatments for the sequel that involved like Darth Maul and things like that, and that Bob Iger basically came down and said, remake A New Hope.
Yeah.
And then Kathleen Kennedy walked in and said, but can it be with a girl? And then after that movie, and it made $2 billion, and it was like, okay, he left Kennedy to her own devices. Yeah. And then we got The Last Jedi, which wrecked the fandom, rended it in half completely. Yeah. And then it was a production debacle after debacle after debacle after that. Kennedy has this absolute, unimpeachable history of a terrible financial manager when it comes to running a studio.
Now that we see what she really is, if she has all these titles and all these famous movies, and you're beginning to realize, well, maybe that was Frank Marshall, her husband, who was responsible for that. Maybe it was because Steven Spielberg was watching over that one. Maybe because you sort of realize maybe she doesn't actually deserve any of those credits, because when she's actually given something you would think you'd have 40 years of experience ready for Star Wars, you're ready for it. And then this is what you do, and you do it again and again and again and again. It means maybe you don't actually have any skills as a producer. Because
when you look at her biggest successes, you look at the directors and the screenwriters involved in it. We're talking about Robert Zemeckis, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. I mean, Richard Donner. You
don't have to manage those guys.
No.
They're in charge.
All you have to do is write the checks and make sure that the shit's there when they need it.
Yeah. And if you come and do the dumb idea of Richard Donner, he's like, I'm not going to do that next. So, it's like, it's done. So now she has been unmasked in the last decade when actually given real authority that you would in theory think that if she really was the executive producer on movies of this caliber for 40 years, she'd be ready for this opportunity. This would be easy peasy. And she blew it, and not just once, she did it again and again
and again with the most valuable movie franchise in the history of the world, and she sunk it.
Yeah,
you got to ask yourself how the hell. So, but moving forward, so her big thing, like I said, she didn't really care about Star Wars, so she botched that. She had her eyes set on Indy 5, and she's been working on Indiana Jones 5 since they announced it. And I went back and I checked this today. I could not believe it. I'm like, have the years really gone by that much? 2016. They announced Indy 5 back in 2016. We are 5 flipping years removed from this.
It'll be 7 years if it ever comes out, even then.
8. Well, yeah, 7 years, but I'm betting it might be longer.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to that at the end of this.
I think it was like early 2016. So it's like mid 20. So yeah, 6.5, or excuse me, 7.5 years. Yeah. But it's insane.
But the pivotal thing that happened in that process, that was the warning sign for everyone, is Steven Spielberg dropped out.
Oh, you and I said that
it was over.
You and I talked about that
with her. Yeah. He said this is his baby too. She's claiming it's her baby. This is his baby, and to the point that he even screwed up the last movie, and he still loved it. But whatever she was doing was so bad that Steven Spielberg said, "Yo, I ain't gonna put my name on this thing. I'm out."
I would take a bad Steven Spielberg movie like that he was truly involved in. Over one that just had his name tacitly attached to it like this one is. Yeah. And you and I talked about this before. Doomcock and I talked about this before. Tom and I on Midnight Session, we talked about this before. This whole business with Spielberg's name still attached to the movie, I don't know how much Spielberg is getting to just lend his name to it, but it ain't cheap. Yeah, it ain't cheap. But I can promise you, people out there watching, the only reason that Lucasfilm, and by extension Chapek, and I'm sure he's like, at this point, screw it, we have to have his name attached.
No, of course,
is because the damage, the absolute damage at the box office that would occur to not have Steven Spielberg's name attached to this movie would be catastrophic.
Absolutely. Yeah. But you see, that's where we are. We're now in part 4 of this 3-part drama. I feel like it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a trilogy in 4 parts, right? Yeah. So we're going through that, right? And so now we're having this part. So suddenly I thought, okay, episode, act 3, she's just gonna wind it out. And then months will go by, we hear a few things like, okay, Harrison Ford was injured, things are delayed, but then it's back on track. And then rumors start coming out about what the movie actually is. And it's really shocking. And what's even more shocking is it's completely believable based on what we've seen. The rumors being,
especially considering the people involved.
And this is exactly the movie you would think she would make because she's out of her mind. The rumors being that essentially this is going to be a time travel movie, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge is going to go back and essentially become the new Indiana Jones, and actually maybe even take the name Indy and take the hat and all that.
It's believable because she did it in Star Wars with Rey. And it's the same thing.
And the archetype of it, and the rumors that, that Indiana Jones dies in it, and then all of that. I was like, well, that's what happened to Han Solo, right? She gets to do it again to Harrison, right? And you're thinking to yourself, and I said this on Doomcock's channel a few days ago. I said, there's serious mental illness involved here, because here's somebody, when she says she's invested in Indiana Jones, she's invested in destroying it. All of these things that she's been associated, she's
invested in herself, and she's using these movies as vehicles.
Yeah, and literally in herself, because Phoebe Waller-Bridge is yet again the archetype of the British brunette that she thinks she is, right? Miss Kennedy, I don't know if she's
just like Rey,
Irish descent, but she identifies with being British brunette. All of her, Rey, Jyn Erso, all of these characters are British brunettes. Even in Solo.
Which, for the record, I like Jyn Erso.
Okay, at least. I like Jyn Erso. Like I said, I like Rogue One. But look, you have Solo, which I didn't see, but you have Khaleesi in there.
You didn't miss anything.
British, and she's not blonde, as we all know her as blonde. She's brunette. You have a British brunette as Han Solo's.
And I love Emilia Clarke. I liked her in that movie, but I'm like I could have done without the rest of it.
But that's exactly it. But Amelia Clark is her. So you have Ray is her. Gina is her. Amelia Clark.
It's the self-insert.
It's the same thing. The British. I mean, if you just put a black woman in there, I might say, okay, she's trying something, right? But if you're always a white, if you put a white woman with a Southern accent, she's trying something. It's a white British woman every time who's a brunette. It's an archetype now. It's who she thinks she is, and to do it 4 times and have those characters one up the male characters of these projects that you've been associated with for 40 years, 4 times means you're crazy.
There is definitely a pattern going on, and this is
it's a pathological. I'm going to destroy these white men that I have been associated with. I'm going to humiliate them and replace them with an image of myself as the heroine. That's crazy.
And meanwhile,
4 times.
Meanwhile, Frank is on his 3rd bottle of bourbon for the night.
I've met them both. In all honesty, I like them. I met Kathleen Kennedy 20 years ago. I have
nothing personally against her.
It's not personal. It's like this is how you have managed this. Maybe
she's a terrible business manager. She's atrocious.
Maybe in other capacity, you would have been a very successful person and earned it, not just title. Your whatever skill you've got would have been shown, but we haven't seen it. This is the place for it. And Marshall has shown his abilities without her to do things, right?
Well, this is what, she is, and I've talked about, I think I've talked about this on YouTube before. But I know I talked about this with clients because, like you mentioned earlier, for some of the people out there, I know I work in the financial industry. One of my most admired CEOs of any Fortune 500 company, by far and away, maybe my most admired, is Lisa Su, who, if you don't know who Lisa Su is the CEO of AMD. Like the people that make the CPUs, the big competitor to Intel. They make CPUs, they make graphic processing units, GPUs. Lisa Su took over AMD back in 2012 when AMD was at the lowest point of its history. She turned that whole company around. She had a vision. She came in and she went after Intel and attacked it with a vengeance. And she went at it in a very unconventional way. I don't want to turn this into a retrospective.
But there's an example. You're not saying something about female CEOs.
Exactly. This is my point. Lisa,
their position.
Yeah, I have the utmost respect. I look up to Lisa Su as an example of how you can take something and build something out of almost nothing at that point, at least comparably in the market that it was in, and put all politics aside, put everything aside and say, you know what? We're just going to make a better product. Yeah. We're going to make people love what we produce. And then you have somebody like Kathleen Kennedy out there who was effectively kind of handed her position. Let's be honest. Because of who she was, who she had been around. And she came in there not with a totally broken franchise. Yeah. She didn't show up with a broken IP and have to repair it. She showed up with the most valuable, well-known intellectual property in the history of mankind, the most worldwide beloved characters in the history of mankind, worth billions of dollars. And she broke it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do this. But here we are now with Indiana 5.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be her send-off, right?
This was going to be negotiated treaty with Chapek.
Yeah. This is what we talked about. It's like, this is what she really wanted. This was the carrot that I've said in previous videos, the carrot that was dangled in front of her face. Yeah. Okay, Kathy. You need to go. But I tell you what, we want to make this amicable. We don't want a big scene because especially this is Disney. And Disney especially cannot stand bad press.
No drama.
Yeah. I mean, every turd they drop is covered in gold and smells like roses. And it has been that case since Walt was alive. So here we are at this point. Indy 5 is the carrot dangled in front of her face. And now we get this news today. It's been delayed a year. This is after everything we've discussed with rumors that have come down through sources that Doomcock has spoken to and talked about, that by all accounts at this point, we now really have to scratch our heads.
Others are now reporting this.
Yeah.
There are other sources now saying this, not just Doomcock.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Hashtag Doomcock was right. He's getting confirmed on this.
Yes.
And now we get this news buried in this other Marvel stuff. where they're delaying it not 2 or 3 months, but a whole year.
Yeah, and so,
you have
so
said before, you've said before that you thought Chapek was going to find a way to kibosh this movie.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I'm kind of half with you.
Mhm.
I think he's going to find a way to reshoot a ton of this movie if it turns out to be. And then we get the leaks. The leaks come out, and the reaction from the fans has been
it's a disaster.
Terrible.
People, I mean, and we know,
and days later
people are watching they're watching Doomcock's channel, they're watching all this stuff to see what the reaction is. They're like, oh shoot.
Right. And within a week of that reaction, within a week of that leak happening, confirming the rumors, basically, we get this news it's been delayed a year. And I'm wondering to myself, Disney puts out this first story about Marvel movies being pushed back a couple of months.
Yeah.
And then they bury the Indy thing in there. And I'm thinking this IATSE strike may have provided Chapek a perfect little bit of cover.
Yeah. And let's clarify, there is no IATSE strike yet. It is a possibility. What people are afraid of, the rumors that we're hearing that they're shutting down Mandalorian, whatever, productions are afraid. In the IATSE, the situation was that this union, its leaders came to a negotiated settlement last Friday with the studios and went back to the membership saying, we have a great deal for you. The problem is that they had riled up the membership for the past several months, stating that certain things were red lines that were going to be guaranteed, otherwise it would go on strike. And none of those red lines were addressed in the final thing that the leadership accepted. And that's a disastrous PR thing. And so immediately, within minutes of people getting the actual deal terms, there was an eruption on social media of crew members all over the country and actually internationally as well, where people were saying this is wrong.
I know Canada is in there. They're talking about some of the brethren unions that are in Europe, in the UK, in the EU, are talking about, I think Script was talking about this today, Script Doctor on Midnight's Edge. Unfortunately, I didn't get to catch all of Midnight's Edge today. I was busy at work. I was in client meetings, but I did catch a little bit of that. So it seems like it's more widespread, which, look, I think given the circumstances, I think these guys are right.
No, they have a look. If I can be as frank as possible, IATSE broke my heart in 2007 because when we writers went on strike, as a strike I supported at the time because it was what we needed, because the studios were saying they weren't going to essentially allow the Writers Guild to cover streaming, which is this new crazy thing that's not going to be a major part of the community. Now Netflix is the dominant figure, right? But at the time, you're not going to
new media.
New media is still new. We're like, no, this has to be covered in the Writers Guild agreement. And they said no, and then we struck over it and we got it, right? That's why now if I go work for Netflix, it's under a contract with that's under the guild. And so I supported that strike. And at the time, IATSE didn't. Our friends in the crew, and I remember that it was very painful that they would publicly, the IATSE leaders of the time, these are not the same people, but this is 15 years ago, the IATSE leaders of the time, and a lot of crew members said, you're just a bunch of selfish writers, you're ruining all of our industry, you're not letting me pay for my mortgage because you demanding more. I was like, look, man, I don't want to be on strike, but I actually think this is my future here, right? And in that same place, they're now in that situation.
Yeah, sometimes you got to take a shot. Yeah.
And I feel compassion for them as human beings. I'm kind of resentful that when the situation was reversed, they weren't there on our side, but whatever. It is where we are now. And so most people feel sympathy for, and I always feel sympathy for crew. Let me clarify, as you said, I differentiate unions and workers, right?
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say. And it may have been back then to where, they were getting pressure from the union leadership. And by union leadership, I mean the multimillionaires.
Yeah, the big bosses. The big bosses with Jimmy Hoffa's there.
And that's the thing that everybody out there, and maybe this week after seeing what was said by their union leader, maybe some of those, some of those hardworking men and women out there on the sets are finally realizing that, your union leaders may not be what you think they are.
No, and
if they come out there and they run out there and they say that, oh, we're all good, we made a deal, blah, blah, blah. And then you see the details and then the union members are like, dude.
Yeah.
And
it is, and I get
because those union leaders, they're going to the same country clubs as those studio heads and those directors. They're sitting at the table sharing the same champagne, guys. And so we are at this place, a historical moment
where people are beginning to realize that, unions have become what people who were afraid of unions 100 years ago warned of. They've essentially become communist hierarchies where you have a rich elite mismanaging the lives of people beneath it. But
pretty much,
setting that aside. So that's what they've become. And so now people with social media are able to convey information to each other. This doesn't feel right. And so now, and it's amazing the events that essentially happened on Monday, because this thing started on Friday with the IATSE. On Friday, it's all settled. And then Friday evening, people are like, what the hell is this? And then social media eruption began, and it got worse and worse over the weekend as more and more people, rank and file union members, carpenters, average guys, working class guys said, nah, I ain't going to do this. I'm not going to vote yes for this. And there began to be a dawning realization in the Hollywood power structure over the weekend that it is possible. It is a realistic possibility that this deal will be voted down, right? We don't know that. It has not happened yet, but it is a realistic, I don't know if it's probable, but it's certainly highly possible.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so as a result of that, it is not surprising that over the weekend, we started people going, I think these guys might strike. Shoot, okay. If we have to shut this down and make sure that we don't invest further into a black hole, and then know that we have an incomplete Mandalorian season 3, and suddenly it's shut down for 6 months, and we've lost millions of dollars that are going to have interest on the payments that we have on these things. I think we have to pull the plug now, right? Until this is resolved. And maybe it'll resolve in 2 weeks. Maybe everyone's going to vote for this, say yes, and everyone can breathe again, right? But until it's unresolved, it's a major risk factor. So that started happening over the weekend. And then on Monday, today, we have this. It was literally the first day I woke up and I had emails about it in the morning already, because Andy was something that obviously had been planned. And the argument is, well, look, it's just because we're concerned about where production is. Let's because there may be a strike, let's push everything back a couple months. And then la-di-da, in the bottom of the thing, paragraph 7, line 4, you notice Indiana Jones is delayed for a year.
That's a little bit out of place. Yeah.
Everything else you can argue is about IATSE, right?
Yeah.
This ain't about
the Marvel stuff. Like I get it. Okay. They pushed everything back 2 or 3 months because you have some of these movies that are in post-production. Yeah. You have some of these movies who are just starting principal photography. And you have many of these movies, the ones that are slated for 2023 and beyond. These movies haven't even started principal photography yet. So they just pushed everything back a notch because, again, all these Marvel movies,
a window of protection.
Yeah, give them a window, and they're all they can't just jump one over the other because of the way the MCU works. One movie flows to the next, kind of, sort of, at least tacitly.
There's a connection. There's a story.
But
there.
Indy being delayed a full year after they've been in production since flipping June. There's something more to this. There's something wrong. And like I said, I think Chapek was trying to get out in front of this.
Yes.
With the IATSE thing. One, maybe to win a little bit of favor with IATSE, which I don't blame him one bit. Sure. Because I think you and I talked about this Sunday night on Doomcock show. A guy like Jon Favreau, who loves his crew on The Mandalorian and all the Disney Plus shows. And the crew, they're on camera like on Star Wars Gallery. They love Jon. They adore the guy. Yep. He is a people's guy. He is an actor's director. He is a cruise director.
My close friend is high level in his crew and has only good things to say about him.
Yeah, and this is a guy like Jon Favreau would probably love to be able to say, guys, his IATSE union crew, dude, I'd love to double your pay right now, but I can't because the union says I'm capped here. I would love to pay you more and give you X, Y, and Z, but the union won't let me. And that's a whole nother conversation. But a guy like Chapek might be trying to get out in front of something like this because why wouldn't he want to curry favor with these? They rely on this. Yeah. So let me try to curry some favor with this.
The other alternative is to keep moving forward with your projects, but then use non-union crews or get around it or film overseas or find some way around it. That's the other alternative, which
But that has its own set of additional expenses as well.
Yes.
But looking at Indy 5, there seems like there's a lot more going on here between Kennedy and everything else. There has to be, because a 1 year delay, and like I said, we haven't seen anything yet from Sony Pictures. from Universal, from Warner Brothers. Nobody else has really come out and said we're announcing a slate of delays. It just seems to me a little funny that we got the story about the MCU things pushing everything back, like right off the bat this morning, and then buried in right after it was Indy 5, but a whole freaking year.
Yeah. And so
this was a calculated story release.
Yeah. And this was planned for some time. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Bob Chapek himself released the storyline of Indiana Jones as a feeler to see what it's the thing with the Emperor Palpatine did in Return of the Jedi. He's the one that released the plans to the Death Star, right? I mean, this guy is like Palpatine. He really
I'll witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
So but he is that guy. He really is Palpatine in a good way. He's Palpatine in the genius way, right? And so I would not be surprised if he leaked that out just because he's like, I don't know about the script. Well, what is this crap here? Are the people going to want this? I don't want more drama on this from the stupid Lucasfilm. I thought I solved this crap, right? Okay, and then he's like, put it out. Oh my God, boss, reaction's really bad. Damn it. All right. And but a year gives him a few things. Like I said, I always said that in a worst case, and I've always said it's a worst case scenario. And even though it feels like it was 20 years ago, but it was a week ago that I was saying on Midnight Edge on the Places, and our friend Tom was like, I don't know about that. It seems unrealistic. I said a week ago, man, he'll kill it if he needs to. He'll take the loss rather than destroy this. But what are your options? Killing it is the final thing that you have to do in the road.
Yeah.
What are your other options? Your other options are, your first thing is reshoot. Reshoot the whole damn movie if you need to, because that happens anyway on a Kathleen Kennedy production, right? You reshoot the whole damn movie. There's nothing new about that, right?
And that's why I was talking about that earlier. Everything Kennedy has touched, by and large, almost everything she has touched since being at Lucasfilm has turned into a fiscal disaster for Disney. It's been a complete mess.
And so what we're having now is you got a year.
Mm-hmm.
In that year, if I'm Bob Chapek, what I'm doing is now I can breathe. I've got a year. I sit down, and I don't even know how much Kathleen Kennedy's involved in the meeting. It's like, here's your contract. Shut up. You got a year we got to fix this now, right?
Yeah. So and you're talking about even if they extend her contract, because we're coming up, and I want to kind of re-highlight this to close out.
Yeah.
Her contract, just for everybody out there watching, the last time it was renewed was 2018, and it was extended from October 30th of that year to October 30th, allegedly a 3-year contract. From every bit of information that we know, we've not heard anything to the contrary from any Hollywood publication, which would be this year, October 30th, 2021.
And so all this happens 2 weeks before that contract.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, we've been talking about this, and I've been consistent. I've been saying Kennedy's out. I mean, you can say what you want. Oh, they love the woke stuff. They want to push this. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, this is about flipping money.
Yeah.
And she has lost Disney a buttload of it. You cannot argue this. It is empirical fact. It's done. It's baked in the cards. But we come to this point and we get the rumors from guys like Mikey Sutton and Geekosity. And look, Mikey Sutton's a good guy. I got nothing but respect for the man. I may not agree with all of the rumors, or I may not think that all of them are valid. But again, like Doomcock, he's passing along rumors. He's passing along information.
And there are people that are calling him with agendas.
Sure. So again, this is nothing against Mikey Sutton at all. So please, I don't want anybody to misunderstand whatsoever.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I'm like, okay, let me try to think logically. And you and I had this discussion. What is the happy middle ground here? What could be going on? To where we think, by all accounts, financially speaking, that Kathleen Kennedy should be out the door. But at the same time, Mikey Sutton's reporting she's going to be renewed. Okay, let's think about this. It tells me kind of like everybody got upset earlier this year with the whole Alex Kurtzman thing over at Paramount. Well, you can't kibosh somebody who's in charge of a major studio like that, or at least a major IP, unless you have a replacement. That's number one. That tells me they don't have anybody there. People have been talking about Jon Favreau. I have said since, February, March, shortly after I got on YouTube, Jon Favreau is not going to be the head of Lucasfilm. He doesn't want to be.
He's a filmmaker.
He's a storyteller and a filmmaker. Is great. I think Jon Favreau would be a fantastic studio head for Lucasfilm, but the man don't want to do it because that's not him. It's not in his soul.
Movies. Yeah, and not all of them are going to be with Disney. He doesn't want to be tied down. The man made a great movie. Like, my son and I love Chef.
My son loves that is a father-son movie. If I've ever seen one in my life, it's a beautiful movie. That is Jon Favreau at his core beauty of storytelling, chef.
Yeah, heartfelt tales.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely an exquisite piece of storytelling. I want Jon Favreau to keep doing stuff like that. He can't do that sitting behind the CEO chair of Lucasfilm. So they got to find somebody else, even if it's just a financial figurehead.
Yep.
You know, like they have Lin-Wen Brennan, who's the general manager right now of Lucasfilm. And Lin-Wen is, by all accounts, she's running the day-to-day operation. Mohsen Gupta's running all the financial stuff. I mean, you know, Kathleen Kennedy's an absentee landlord. So even if they have to extend her contract out 6 months or a year so they can kind of gracefully get her out the door, because again, remember folks, Bob Chapek really didn't have much control over any of this until the last few months.
Yeah, he's written since June, I'd say. He hasn't been the boss since June.
No.
The moment I found him,
Iger's still floating around.
Yeah,
and Alan Horn just left.
Yeah.
Or just announced he was leaving.
And I put that on Patreon. When Alan Horn resigned, I said, okay, that's he's flushing these guys out. But all right, so let's get back to what's going to happen in Act 4 of this 3-act play, right?
Go for it. Let's close it out.
So if I am Bob Chapek right now, I've bought myself a year. All right. I bought myself, a year and a half, really, right? But a year in essentially production. What I'm immediately going to do is I'm going to fix the script, right? So I would not be surprised if he took Jon Favreau out for dinner and said, "Hey, can you just take a look at this?" I'm not saying that Favreau would rewrite it, but I'm saying, internally he's come to trust that guy in Lucasfilm, right? Can you just take a look at this thing? Can you give me some thoughts here? Can you refer one of your guys? What can I do with this thing, right? Because he's not the guy that's going to solve. Chapek is the one that's going to solve story problems. That's not his job, right? But he's going to start looking at how do we solve this? Okay, and if I were him, I'd turn to the guy I know who's fixed this kind of nonsense for Kennedy in the past, which is Favreau, and I have a dinner with him and say, give me some thoughts here. So the next several months are going to be rewriting this script. And then figuring out what they can do with regard to shoots and what they can do with Harrison Ford. Now, if we think about it, well, we've heard from this Rise of Palpatine movie that I've not watched, but we've heard that there were multiple entirely different scripts with entirely different villains and entirely different arcs, right? And they filmed stuff.
What happened to Matt Smith?
Yeah, they filmed that. So the idea that they could start all over is what they've done at Lucasfilm.
They have 2 movies from that.
Yeah, we could throw out, maybe Phoebe Waller-Bridge isn't in the final cut. Who knows what the hell this movie could be? Because there's that 3. If they could throw out Matt Smith as the villain, the adversary that culminates the trilogy.
James Bond actually showed up at the end of it. They cut that part out. Lucas didn't like it. No.
Well, whatever.
And he died.
So now all the intention is fix this thing anyway. So I don't close a possibility that this can be completely rewritten from scratch, and then they start over. If they can do an emergency rewrite in the next 3 months, and then in January, February or so, they are off in pre-production of essentially a new movie. That's enough time. They have a full year on a new movie. They can do it. Right. And then it'll be by the end of next year. It's done. It's, it's edited. It's posted. It'll be available for May of 2023 if it's finished by the end of next year. So they've got 3 to 4 months to come up with a whole new script if they need to. They may just try to fix what they've got. But the problem is what they've got is so horrifically bad for this franchise. I would tell them, Bob, hey, look, Bob, start all over. Hire Kamran Pasha. You will sit down with Jon Favreau and we'll make it work, right? And you'll have the script
and I would believe Kamran Pasha would probably be far more respectful to the character. And I will say this.
Colin Trevorrow. I read his Duel of the Fates.
His Duel of the Fates, his Duel of the Fates, actually, for what he managed to try to pull off after the complete disaster that Rian Johnson left him, which is why, folks, Colin Trevorrow left the 3rd Star Wars sequel trilogy movie. He was supposed to do it. He ran out because he said, you handed me a 3rd movie where Luke Skywalker is gone and dead and your arch villain that you set up is already dead. Piss off.
But to his credit, he actually wrote a version.
He wrote an actual great treatment with Duel of the Fates to try to fix it. But I will say this: I think it's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on James Mangold's Twitter feed in the next few weeks.
When you start seeing him freaking out, it's when this movie is taken away from him, and he may have already been taken away from him. That's why he was freaking out.
I don't know if they'll take it away from Mangold. I think that would cause too much of a kerfuffle. But I could see them bringing in, no pun intended, but bringing in a script doctor.
Yeah. Well,
to fix things. Somebody else. So. Yeah.
So that's where we are. So Act 4 of this 3-act tragedy, is Act 4 of this. It's not a tragedy from Chapek's point of view, from Kennedy's point of view, and from our fans' point of view, it's a tragedy. But Act 4 is now essentially trying to fix this new drama that Chapek is like, oh crap, I thought this was done with. Not going to deal with this nonsense. She's this thing I gave her authority of to resolve the issue it's going to be a disaster. And then I'm going to lose another multi-billion-dollar franchise. And then I might not survive with Vanguard and BlackRock going, you're not managing this. We're going to
That's just it. Because Chapek's ass is the one on the hot seat. He's the CEO. If he sits there, and this is what people have to understand, if he presides over, Iger leaves, and this is what everybody needs to understand. This is kind of where I want to wrap it up. Iger leaves. And we've just concluded with Avengers Infinity War and Endgame from the MCU, the pinnacle of theatrical financial success. A 13-year ride with over $20 billion in box office receipts and probably another $20 or $30 billion between Blu-rays, DVDs, and merchandise sales from that MCU property. Yep. He buys in Star Wars, and they had a success, from that standpoint, like, every movie made over $1 billion, blah, blah, blah. And then Iger promptly walks out the door after buying Fox and all this other stuff and goes, here's Chapek.
Good luck.
And exactly. And Chapek is now saddled with a flailing MCU. And let's be honest, folks, I don't give a damn what you think about what the box office was for Shang-Chi and what it's going to be for the Eternals and all this kind of stuff. Sony's Venom and Sony's Spider-Man, by comparison, budget to receipts and financial returns, is going to kick Disney's butt. Going to kick Disney's
because those are still compelling characters.
Yeah.
You've got the B team and the C team here.
Yeah.
I don't care about
you still have Doctor Strange, Guardians, and
which are the last remnants of the A character.
And how far off are they now? So you have a flailing, by comparison to what we've gotten to this point, you have a flailing Marvel Cinematic Universe. You have 3 series on Disney Plus so far, which have been met with, at best, tepid reception, lukewarm reception. There's nothing going anymore, and there's now
no passion like there was for Mandalorian.
And now you've got that passion. Yeah, and now Mando's going to be delayed because of IATSE, which I understand, but I mean it's another thing that Chapek has to deal with.
Yeah,
and now you've got Indiana Jones 5, which is the biggest yet to be done notch in the belt for Disney, and now it looks like it's looking ugly, and it's not Harrison Ford's fault.
Well,
there's some people out there I know that are upset that, people think, some people are being ageist or something like this. I mean, yeah, okay, Harrison Ford, yes, the man is about 80 years old. Can he still pull off Indiana Jones? You damn right he can. I have no problem with that. Yes, he got hurt. Yes, it takes longer to heal when you're older, but he's back on set. The problem is not Harrison Ford. The problem is the people running this production and the person who's ultimately in charge. And now Chapek has to deal with this. So this guy, he can't just sit there and watch. He can't watch the House of Mouse burn around him for some of the most valuable IPs.
Because it'll be his ass.
It'll be his ass. Now Disney still has the theme parks, which are back into profitability, no question. Disney still has their amazing linear content, okay, which is ESPN, ABC. You got to realize Disney owns damn near every major sporting event in this country. There are 32 college football or 32 college bowl games every year. Just so y'all understand, ESPN owns 30 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. ESPN is a monster. They make a ton of money. Hulu makes a ton of money. So Disney has a lot of centers that are very profitable, but you got to realize Disney is still, for the folks out there, Disney is still very, very in touch with their public image. And when they have their properties like Star Wars or Marvel or, God forbid, Indiana Jones that are tarnished, that is a painful knife to take.
So now this is what we're going to see in the next year. We don't know how next year is going to play out. Even let's say they get a brilliant rewrite, even if it's not a full rewrite script. Personally, I think they should just start all over. But even they get the script that they need. Let's say they get the script they need. There is no guarantee that Harrison Ford will be in the health condition to actually fulfill all of his obligations next year.
That's another concern.
I want him to live a very long life, but we just don't know, right? And so if, God forbid, Mr. Ford exits our plane of reality next year or during this filming process, it creates a disaster scenario for Chapek. In that scenario, I can imagine Bob Chapek shutting it down and saying, we're going to rest this, we're going to honor Harrison Ford, and at an appropriate time, we'll relaunch with young Indiana Jones or a new version of this story, but it's not something appropriate, especially because there's the memory of what happened to Carrie Fisher on The Last Jedi, right?
Yeah, that's what concerns me.
That's
there's that nostalgia. And I want Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford to be given the respect they deserve.
And he's getting that feedback.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he didn't give it 6 months, because maybe it's 7 scenes that need to be reshot, right? He could do that in 6 months, right?
Yeah, we really don't know how much of the movie they shot. I mean, they spent what, a month in Glasgow?
Yeah. They probably shot 80% of the movie. That's her track record. They probably shot 80% of the movie and then realized it's a disaster. That's how it works. So, but the year gives them the chance to really fix this and gives them the chance to see Harrison Ford's time with us, right? Yeah. And so I remain of the position that and it is a worst case scenario. It's not in Bob's interest to shut down Indiana Jones. It is in his interest to make a wonderful Indiana Jones that honors Harrison Ford, passes the torch on to the future, and moves the franchise forward. That's in his interest. He's not being given that with the material that he has today. So he's now doing the best he can with the disaster he's been given. Right?
Yeah.
So this 1 year will allow him to do and I believe it will be one of these things where he's going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at fixing this, right? And if at the end of next year Harrison Ford ain't with us or can't finish this film, I think if I were him, I'd say pull the plug out of and present it as a PR thing. Yes, we'll have a massive several $100 million loss, but guess what? We've had a massive several $100 million loss on several other Kathleen Kennedy projects. I'd rather take a $250, $300 million loss than a $1 billion loss.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of moving parts to this. I think this is going to be a very, very interesting story to follow. And Kamran, I can't thank you enough for spending this much time tonight. I know you're a busy guy. This has been amazing. I think this is going to be a hit out there for the folks on YouTube. They, the last couple of videos you and I did, everybody seemed to really, really love this. So I appreciate you being here. And folks out there, please make sure you go check out Kamran Pasha's Patreon. There will absolutely be a link below this video that you can go punch up down there and go support Kamran over there. And you can follow Kamran on not Twitter, on Instagram. I almost said Twitter.
It's just my name, Kamran Pasha 72. I'm no longer on Twitter. Due to certain flying monkeys who decided I can't. People unemployed who have underemployed sitting around going, this guy's making me feel bad about myself. Hey, buddy at Twitter, can you get him out of here? Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully we can get Kamran to do some video posts on Patreon soon. I'm going to try to help him with that.
Yeah, he's helped me figure out the StreamYard all of it.
Yeah, we're going to get you hooked up over there.
Like some interesting famous people that might be able to do an interview.
That would be awesome. Yeah. So anyway, it's good to see everybody tonight or this morning, rather, by the time you see this video. So appreciate everybody being here. Thank you, Kamran. Thank you, audience. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button, the like button, share this video out. That's so important on YouTube. Hit that notification bell. Until next time, God bless. Take care.